for many of us. Where are people in the world? I'm in Moscow, so it's relatively civilized. It's been a big week. I appreciate a lot of people just going to be coming in last minute. That always happens there. And I want to say hello before we begin. Unmute, raise a hand, wave, middle finger gesture, and live in Sweden. Cool. Prison chaplain. Wonderful job. Wonderful job. Yeah. I mean, the Swedish, you're like mystical pros, you know? You practically invented this shit. So I think, you got Viking blood, places full of mushrooms, you live in the woods. So some definite advantages in Sweden. I also want to say hi. Raise your hand and mute. We'll start in a few minutes, so we've got time. It's going to be a nice small group because of the time. We have quite a large UK audience, and they're probably all in bed on a Saturday at 7 a.m. So America's still mostly in bed, unless some of the Californians are staying up late. Virginia said, "You're a bit dark." I said, "That's true." I'm going to keep it that way for dramatic effect today. I'm quite ready to put a shirt on and sort the lighting out. I like these. This is Airbnb, but they have like proper art here. They're trees, but they're also like bronchial veins. I just finished my morning practice, and these are quite nice to trip out on. I don't know how they got real after Airbnb, but good job. Hey, Kashtinka? I can't say the name very well. Do you want to tell me how to say it?
Kshantika.
Kshantika. Well, that makes sense. Okay, Kshantika. It's Sanskrit root?
Yes, Sanskrit.
What does it mean?
It's one of their paramitas, patience.
It's the one I'm not very good at. That's why I don't know the word. My Buddhist terminology is normally pretty good, but I probably should learn this one.
Yeah. So the ka just takes it from a noun to from a verb to a noun. So it's Kshanti. So Virya and Kshanti.
Are you one of my Triratna friends?
Yeah.
Cool. A bunch of them in Brighton. Vidyadasa, Tavajra, Dhamakara, they're good friends of mine.
Yeah.
They're teaching me Sanskrit just by trying to learn their names.
Yeah. And throwing a bit of Pali just to confuse it.
I call them, a bit of Pali in there too, right? It's a bit of a mix in Triratna. I call them D, V, and T. That's just what I call them, so, for simple.
Yeah, I get called KK.
KK. No KKK. That wouldn't be so good.
We are on time.
Time is an illusion, but let's start. No big intro. Don't big intro.
Well, there we go. So I'll just say hello and welcome everybody to this session on what most teachers suspect but don't talk about: trauma and mysticism, with Mark Walsh, who didn't want a big intro this morning, but you should know him by now. And if you don't, look him up on YouTube. He does amazing stuff on embodiment. And this is a side of him he doesn't normally reveal. He's all about practical and hands-on and what works. And he's talking about mysticism. So I'm super interested to hear what he has to say. I'm Virginia. If you have any problems with a Zoom, do private message me. And if you're here on the live stream, it means you've got the all access pass. And if you don't, and you're watching it on the replay, you still have time to do that. There's loads of good talks. So you can go to www.embodimentunlimited.com/hidden-trauma and get that for yourselves. There's more than 70 talks available, so you can watch them in your own time. And do talk about this to anyone who you think will benefit from it. Do share with a friend. It will be too late if you leave it for next week. Share it now. After this talk, think of one person you can talk to.
Yeah, have a rustly mic. Let's just start. Let's just start. I think it's enough. Thank you, Virginia. Thanks for getting up early to host. Welcome, everyone. If you want to turn your camera on, I really appreciate it. I love to see people. And yeah, where are you in the world? That's kind of nice, because the time of day really matters for this stuff we're going to talk about. So if you want to throw that in, where you are on the planet is not an insignificant detail. Okay, so I'm tripping balls right now, not on drugs, but I do a fairly strong practice every morning, usually around breath work and meditation, sometimes some dance, sometimes some TRE, some trauma releasing exercises. And I normally time it, so I'm sort of normalizing before I have to be public facing. But just for shits and giggles, I decided not to today for this. So I was practicing up to about 7 minutes ago. So if I seem a little incoherent and weird, that's because I've been dissolved in the universe and I'm now trying to get individually self-fated again. So this may take a little while, but by the end of the thing, I'll probably remember I'm an individual self as well as everything. So minor detail. Yeah, so if this is going to be a little harder to be irresponsible today. I just hid self-view. What a wonderful mystical thing you can do on Zoom, you know? It's like the ultimate Buddhist button, hide self-view. And from a safety point of view, I am going to talk about trauma. And I might go a little dark and I might make some jokes. So if you're kind of like delicate about your kind of trauma healing, and there's a phase for delicacy, you know, when we need to be tenderly taken care of, and usually in therapy one-to-one. Probably not the place for Zooming with Mr. Walsh, especially on this topic. So just, you know, take care of yourself. Like Ranko's outside, that's a good move. Feel free to move. If you find yourself freezing up, stopping breathing, then, you know, maybe take a break, pause, always watch the recording. And are there any Californians still awake? Because it's like this is going to be really offensive to you, but luckily offensiveness is not a concept that really exists. Okay, so don't worry about it. Yeah. All right, good. So more people. Let me see more humans. Cameras. Let me see a few of you. I know if it's early and you're like, don't worry. Me too. Me too. Okay, mysticism. What's the definition of mysticism, Victoria? Can you look up the one sentence Wikipedia definition and type it in the chat? I have no idea. So I'm from kind of a mystical family. My family's full of crazy people and also very religious people and people who are inclined to the individual pursuit of the divine, as opposed to the kind of religious structures around it. So all religions have a mystical tradition and we have an orthodox religious tradition, neither of which should be demonized, both of which have purpose and adherence. And my family have always lent towards the more mystical side. And my mum was actually a contemplative Catholic nun. So that's got a lot more in mind with mindfulness common. And my dad was, let's face it, a very bad boy. So this is my family history. My aunt was a schizophrenic, my dad's an epileptic, blah, 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 blah. It's in the genes one way or another. Why am I talking about mental illness? Because there's often a crossover. They're not this mysticism and mental illness isn't the same thing. Like I kind of, one way of looking at it is like a schizophrenic is just a mystic who can't turn it off, right? It's not entirely that. There is some pathology normally to schizophrenia beyond that. However, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah. So who here has taken mushrooms or acid or something like that? Just had a kind of chemically induced experience. Some of you might not want to admit it. So that's how my world is a lot of the time. Okay. Yeah. And I can turn that up or down with different embodied practices. So sometimes I turn it down because I'm like, I'm trying to have a meeting with my accountant and she's talking about taxation and I'm melting right now. And that's probably not very helpful. So, you know, to be able to kind of get your shit together and what would be the word? Incarnate is useful. So embodiment is particularly useful for that. Like bum on the ground, feet on the floor, bum on the ground. Where am I? These are my boundaries. It's me. Okay. And that on one level is true. So on another level, that's totally not true. Okay. You're not you. You're everything. Okay. So from a mystical point of view, the experience is sometimes called the oceanic experience, where it's kind of dissolving into everything, becoming one with everything, as the Mexicans said to the Dalai Lama when ordering a pizza. Yeah, so one with everything. You don't know this joke? It's a fucking great joke. Look it up on YouTube. So what did the Mexicans say to the Dalai Lama about his pizza? Make me one with everything. So that's a good joke. Yeah, if you're not laughing, you're not a mystic, by the way. There's like humor is in, there is a dick joke at the end of the universe. Yeah, I suspect it's a vagina joke if you're a woman, but the universe really is making a lot of fun the whole time. I don't normally talk about this stuff because my life has been making embodied work really practical and accessible. And if I talk about this stuff too much, people go, whoa, it's weird, it makes it inaccessible. And then a lot of really good people who aren't this way inclined would not get the benefits, right? Like imagine if kind of like all mindfulness was like some Tibetan crazy lama, yeah? And people would just be like, that's too weird. So it's really good that we've got secular mindfulness and Zen, you know, different schools that might be, actually the Zen people are mental too. It might be different schools that are more accessible, right? So this is often why I don't talk about this stuff. There's two more reasons why I don't talk about it. One is, it's very hard to know if you're qualified or just a lunatic with mysticism. In that, even though I've been exploring this stuff since I was a child, you know, read about it, obviously through experience is the main thing. Mysticism is by definition experiential, like embodiment. It's not, you know, theoretical. You know, it doesn't help much reading books. You know. It can give you a bit of framework and structure, can reassure you, but it's not that helpful. So it's hard to know if you're qualified. And I really only like to talk about things that I'm qualified to talk about. So, for example, during the pandemic, I'm not making any pronouncements about virology or vaccines because it's just not my expertise, right? So I just shut the fuck up about it. While during the pandemic, I have made comments about like social isolation and bodily boundaries because that's my topic, right? That's part of embodiment. So I think there's a humility in, I'm not known for my humility, but when it comes to what I teach, I'm quite, it's quite important to me that we don't talk shit, right? So that we talk about what we're well qualified for. And it's really hard to know if you're qualified on this topic. And there's real dangers in it. You know, there's real dangers, which we'll come to in a minute around trauma as well. A lot of people think they're the guru and that ends up very badly, right? I'm in Moscow right now, the land of Rasputin. He was a mystic. Yeah, didn't end very well, did it? You know the story? Hard to kill, motherfucker. It's only 5 axes or something in it. But you can really end in manipulation, in his case with the Russian royal family, violence, and a lot of self-delusion. Like a lot of my hippie friends think they have magic powers and they don't, okay? They don't. They're just compensating for being losers, yeah? So it's the compensatory function of thinking you can do something special because you can't do something normal. All right, you don't have normal success. That's pretty controversial, huh? Yeah. So Virginia's cringing because you fucking know it's true as well. Not for everyone, but it's like if you haven't got money, status, beauty, success, the normal values of society, it's very easy to say, yeah, but I'm spiritual. Or yeah, but I have some magic powers, right? It's an immediate fuck you. Like, yeah, money doesn't matter to me. And it's so much more convincing when someone has had money or has had fame and then they give it up, right? It's so much more convincing. It's like, oh, you've actually seen through money, right? It's like guys like, yeah, I'm not into like surface sex, you know. I'm like, that's because you can't get laid, right? It's like, I lived above a nightclub in Brazil for 6 months. I actually had a chance to see through shallow sex. Well worth it if you ever get the chance. So there's a piece here around compensatory kind of boasting around magic powers that needs to be really careful with. That's the second thing to be careful of. Third one is can be quite dangerous territory. So like a lot of the practices I might talk about, whether it's you know, breath work, hallucinogens, dancing, fasting, these are all things I've done to a fairly hardcore degree, most of them. They're all dangerous. Okay. So some are more dangerous than others. Like dancing is maybe less dangerous. So, you know, you see a few twisted ankles and 5 rhythms. And some of them, you know, like I'd say anyone with a mental health history, do not do fucking mushrooms or acid. Do not do that. Okay. And I limit myself to once a year, obviously somewhere where it's completely legal, like Amsterdam. I limit myself to once a year because, you know, I have a strong mental health history in my family. So I'm not going to be ingesting things very often, maximum once a year. Yeah. And, you know, if you look at traditional societies, they might have done these kind of things 2 or 3 times in their life. So the way it's being done now, so they're just fucking tripping every weekend is pretty irresponsible. Breath work, nothing. Breath work, by the way, can stimulate trauma. So people that have hyperarousal, maybe you shouldn't be doing Wim Hof. Yeah, much as I love Wim Hof. Cold exposure. I've seen people take ice baths and then actually forget where they are, like cause memory problems. So even something like an ice bath, it looks pretty benign. Not so much if you do it particularly in extreme forms, you know? So there's a lot of dangers here, physically, mentally, guru-wise, you know, thinking you've got powers, therefore, you know, you can fuck whoever you want or whatever. If I ever go, oh, I'm the guru so I can fuck my students, please shoot me in the head, Virginia, okay? Just shoot me in the head without question. Too much damage has been done that way. And again, just scaring people off and sounding weird, right? But I kind of also realized that there's people who are ready to hear stuff, and it kind of gets dishonest if you don't talk about this stuff at all, because it's part of my life. It's part of my daily life, like literally every morning. And sometimes I go through periods where it's the whole day, you know, I go through a couple of months where it's really tricky not to just dissolve. And so I remember once I was teaching and someone said some example, they're like, well, you're not that chair. They were a good example of what you are and aren't. And I just burst out laughing because the absurdity of the fact that he thought I wasn't the chair was so silly to me. But it was, yeah, like I go through stages where it's more strong. It kind of ebbs and flows. Sometimes for some people, this is seasonal. I know for some women, it's through their cycle. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, what does this have to do with trauma? Well, sometimes people mistake trauma for mysticism. Yeah. They mistake, you know, like low-level psychosis or their hyperarousal, you know, can lead to kind of states, time distortions. These things can happen. I've had periods of time distortion, and some of these things are in common. I had one that you'll find is hilarious, but you know, where time slowed down so much, I was speaking 4 times as quickly as I normally do because it seemed really slow to me. That was difficult for other people. You know. Glad that one passed very quickly. So it's like Virginia sort of says at the time, you know, we're on time. I'm like, we're always on time. What is time? You know, like the past and the future are happening simultaneously. Come on, get with the program. So, you know, but don't worry, you're me and I'm you anyway. So let's not argue. Yeah. So sometimes trauma can lead to things happening which it's really interesting teaching when I'm still tripping. I don't normally do this, so it's taking some focus. Should have left another 10 minutes, I think, between my practice and this. So where was I? See, this is a danger, right? You just become non-functional. So one of the dangers of mysticism is you just lose it and you can't do your accounts, right? So for me, a really skilled mystic is able to kind of come in and out of it, turn it on and off, and has a wise practice. Trauma can also just lead people to spiritually bypass, right? So if the body is a site of terror and unsafety, then the spirit realms can seem very attractive. Yeah, very attractive in a sense of going out of the body, but that's running away from the body. Yeah. So for me, there's different forms of mysticism. For me, the body is kind of a really big part of it. For me, it's like I go into my body rather than dissociating. So in this way, trauma could be a barrier to mysticism as well. Yeah. So I go into my body and I go into the bone and into the marrow, and I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper into myself. And then eventually, if you go deep enough into the body, to me, it becomes transpersonal. So this is where the sort of mystical opens up. And again, I don't talk about this to all my students because they go, what the fuck are you talking about? It's another reason that it's sort of kind of a waste of time talking about mysticism, right? Because it's like either you know it or you don't. It's like either I can see those of you who've had the experiences because you're like, oh yeah, you know, it's kind of obvious at some point, right? It's like water is wet, yeah. there's a saying, isn't there, in the Tao Te Ching, you know, the Tao that can be talked about is not the true Tao. So any conversation about mysticism usually is a load of bollocks, you know, and anyone talking, it's again, it's not that much point trying to teach it. It's lots of dangers, and it's like either people kind of experience it or they don't, and you can't really talk about it because by nature it's that which is difficult to put into language. The languages are cutting up, mysticism is a spreading out and a dissolving. So it's very difficult to use language. It's like trying to dance about architecture, right? I think he said that, someone cleverer than me. I think it was Frank Zappa, he's a mystic. You can dance about architecture, but you'd be better off drawing it. Do you know what I mean? So talking about mysticism is like that. It's like trying to dance about architecture. It's possible, but it's kind of a stretch. You know, this is making sense? You guys with me? Am I talking absolute shit? Checks and balances, another sign of healthy mysticism. Am I losing the plot? Yeah. Anchors. When I was very deep in the state once in Mexico, this cat turned up, and this cat obviously was my wife, and this cat kind of just put its paw on me, and it was like, remember, you're in this world. I was like, oh, thanks, cat, you know. So always useful to have anchors. Cats obviously are tripping the whole time. Cats are mystics. All right, they've got like one paw somewhere else, don't they? Do you get that impression from cats? Dogs are like, I'm here, I'm fully here, I'm in the normal world. Yeah, cats are like, I got a paw somewhere else. You know, that perspective can be very nice from the trauma, when there's trauma as well, because it's like you don't take life too seriously. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a kind of a dream and whatever. You know, there's other things happening, and let's play the game and play the game well, but it's a game. Yeah. What is it Bill Hicks said? Enjoy the ride. It's just a ride. It's scary. It's full of thrills and fears. But remember, it's just a ride, kids. It's just a ride. So when you kind of realize it's just a ride, and you can, you know, okay, you can play the game. It's a joke, but, you know, it doesn't mean you don't work or contribute to the world. Obviously, I'm quite big at that. You know, I like to contribute. I like to do things in the world, but it kind of frees you up. Right? It's like, yeah, you know what? It's like, you know, come out of DMT and you're like, maybe this is all an alien simulation anyway, but let's get on with it. It's kind of, you know what I mean? It's like the lizard people like kind of said it was all a joke, but let's just play along. Yeah. So that's quite freeing. And think about what that does to trauma, because trauma is like, I take myself very seriously. Yeah. And at a certain point in healing, that's really helpful, you know, to address it, to really look at it. But another point of healing, it's less useful. People's healing curve really matures when they start making jokes about their trauma. Yeah, because that shows they're not attached to it. Humor's not just for shits and giggles. I mean, humor's fun, but it's more than that. Humor's an indicator of non-attachment. That's why when you meet a Zen master, just jokes. Like 50% of what they're doing is a joke. Yeah, almost any Tibetan Buddhist, Tibetan master, Theravadan Buddhist, it's just a joke, because it's like there's a non-attachment to things. Okay, it doesn't mean detachment, which is the near enemy of non-attachment, as my Buddhist friends will know. That, oh yes, it's true. Well, Mark, yes. That detachment is more like dissociation from a trauma point of view. So sometimes you see people who are traumatized, they've got dissociation, and it's like, I don't care about life. It's like, yeah, because you're disengaged from it. That's not what I'm talking about. All right, it's the sort of while living a kind of smile that comes with it. Yeah, play the game, enjoy the ride. So dissociation is not being on the ride. Makes sense? There's a difference. Yeah, you're not really on the ride. You're pretending to be somewhere else. Yeah, again, compassionately, it's not criticism. It's like that's how people can survive. But then if they get hold of sort of religious and spiritual ideas, mystical ideas, they can then justify those. So it can keep people in dissociative patterns or hyperarousal patterns when they're like, yeah, this is the universe flowing through me. It's like, no, that's adrenaline and cortisol. Yeah. So it does feel different. And learning to differentiate these things, if you're both traumatized and mystical, is really helpful. Actually, really helpful. Learning to feel the difference in the body between dissociative state and a transcendent state. Yeah, the key thing, include and transcend. It's my close personal friend, Ken Wilber says. Okay, so it's Ken Wilber's, by the way, super loving. People don't realize when you're around Ken, it's just like love. It's just like, oh, I want gonna cry on you. You're my dad. I love you. Yeah. So it's like the love part's there as well. People think he's just clever. He's not just clever. He is like horribly clever, but that's not what defines him. If you're around him, you feel it. Yeah, the kindness thing is one that really comes with mysticism, I think, naturally, because it's like, well, why would you cut off your own arm? Right? So yes, most people need religion to be like, okay, there's some ethics and some morals, and that's great. That's really helpful, right? And I think throwing out religion is one of the worst things the West has ever done, by the way. I think it needs an upgrade, okay? But throwing it out, horrible idea, because most people aren't mystics, yeah? And I'm not saying we should all be Christian, by the way. Though, interestingly, if you were raised in the West, your mysticism will very likely have a Christian bent to it. So I always say my head's Buddhist and my heart's Christian. Yeah, so Jung talks about this. Jung actually said, don't bother doing yoga meditation. He took it a bit far, I'd say. But there's a kind of imprinting that happens. And the last layers before all the layers are gone is usually the thing that you're culturally imprinted on. Like ducks, they come out, little ducklings, and they imprint on, you've seen the Conrad and Lorenz stuff. You're sort of mystically imprinted. Okay, so coming into a mature relationship with your religion of childhood is really helpful, and that can be difficult. If people have too much pain or abuse there, too much trauma, that can be very difficult. So that can be another way trauma can be a barrier. Some people just seem to be inclined towards other stuff, and you get the person who just was born Buddhist, it just looks that way, born Hindu or whatever, right? So there's a lot of people who are kind of inauthentically sticking feathers up their ass and pretending to be mystical chickens. And to steal the Zen phrase, sticking feathers up your ass doesn't make you a chicken. And that isn't helpful. Trauma can lead to that. I have this new identity. Some of my good friends have changed their names, for example, or start wearing special clothes or speaking in a special voice. And as Kashinka said, it's not necessarily bad, right? That can come from particularly when they're not attached to it. Like my friend Vidyadasa is like, okay, my friend's Vidyadasa. I'm Vidyadasa, but if that's too complicated, you can call me V. And I used to be called AD. You can call me that if you want. I don't mind, right? There's a kind of non-attachment to the new thing. So for him, it's not like a hard identity. It's not like I have to be called this. It's who I am. No, I'm no longer AD. Yeah. So be careful of those spiritual identities, because they can be ways of getting away from trauma, right? Like I'm not that person who got hurt. I'm this new spiritual person. So you see how complex this relationship is between mysticism and trauma? Because there's ways both stop the other and both support the other. Yeah. So how does mysticism support trauma healing? That's a good question, isn't it, Mark? Yes, good question, Mark. Anything in the chat just to get this a bit more interactive? I see some more of you. I don't mind if you're getting dressed or putting makeup on or going for a walk. I don't mind. It would just be lovely to see you. Like Manja's just like really helping me by being here. I really appreciate her support. Thank you so much. Oh my God, non-existent time is flying. Should we just go over on this one? Let's be badly boundary. Fuck it. That's another risk of mysticism and trauma. You're like, I don't need boundaries because everything is one. Yeah, no, you still need boundaries, motherfucker. Yeah, you still need boundaries. So again, that's another risk of dissolving if you've already got bad boundaries. Make sense? Because trauma could make mysticism harder if you're overly boundaried. If you're under boundaried, it could be easier but more dangerous. Yeah, you're fucked either way. Don't worry, the universe is fucking itself continuously into penetration. It's one big fuck, so don't worry about the swearing. Yeah. Alrighty, so yeah, none of the dangers, like normal moral standards don't apply to you, right? And it could also be, like, this is where the gurus start fucking their students and things, right? I'm not attached, so I can do this. It's a mystical teaching. It could also be that you let other people do that to you as well. Again, because of the normal moral standards kind of dissolving when you get to a certain level. That's why religion's a thing, right? Rules are good, boundaries are good. Sorry, hippies. Yeah. So this is very contradictory things I'm saying. I know that, and this is why I almost didn't teach this session. It's such a delicate subject because you could take any single thing I've said without the balancing thing and just totally fuck yourself over with it. You could totally misuse it. That's delicate, very delicate. Okay, other ways. I said something the other day that was really popular, like it got memed. Trauma also shows you what can't be hurt. Yeah. So trauma smashes our sense of safety, it can smash our self-esteem, our identity, our physical health, our sense of boundaries, our ability to be in relationships. So much can be really damaged by trauma, and there's some stuff that can't. So people who have been absolutely shattered by trauma, sometimes all that's left is the mystical, the divine spirit. Names do not do it justice, because that's all that's left, right? Like you see some people who have just been broken by trauma, and some of those people have zero access, or no, never zero, very reduced access to, we might say, the divine or spirit or mysticism. But some of them, it just seems like that's all they're left with, right? Now, they're completely dysfunctional on top of that, but they've had an insight into that which can't be hurt. You can't traumatize spirit, would be another way of saying it. Someone meme that. There's a good Facebook quote. Yeah. So the attraction, of course, of spiritual work is that you're going to a place that isn't damaged or hurt. Because it's not even you, right? It's not even your identity. So that's attractive, but also can mean we spiritually bypass the emotions and all that tricky human stuff in the middle. So there's a danger there as well there's an appeal and a revelation. That's how I put it. So the revelation is, whoa, there's some part of me that isn't hurt. And actually, this is kind of a miracle, right? Like the statistics on this, 50% of people who are raped don't get PTSD. Now, they still have trauma symptoms in almost every case, right? And I'm not suggesting it's not a bad thing, it's an awful thing. However, that's actually kind of a miracle. You would expect that anyone violated in such an awful way would always have severe trauma, right? 50%, 3 months later, acute trauma, yes, almost everyone. Chronic trauma symptoms 3 months later, there's 50% of people that don't qualify as PTSD. And I know for a fact that many people who have been raped are functional because many people in this room have, right? Like super common, horribly, unfortunately, tragically, and not acceptably, just to be very clear, not acceptably, not acceptable in any way, never will be, never should be. And what a miracle that people can still function. The same with war, right? Like some of the things I've seen would send your blood cold. Yeah. And yet I'm a loving uncle. I'm a pretty decent husband. I can run a multi-million-pound company just about on a good day, right, Virginia? With a lot of help. Yeah. It's like, wow, that's pretty fucking cool. So trauma reveals the mysticism. It reveals spirit. It reveals that part of us which can't be broken. Yeah. And it also nudges us towards it. It's an extra motivator. Okay, so trauma and mysticism are a very complex relationship. There's some of the ways they relate. There are many more, because there's many aspects of trauma and many types of mysticism. I think that pretty much shares the main thrust of it. Do you want to say in the chat what I've said? Because I literally can't remember. So one of the problems is when I'm slightly in this state, like I'm not like really laying down memories because I'm not really in time. So it'd be really helpful if you could like put in the chat some of the stuff that I've said, because it was probably really good, right? Like I'm quite clever. So that would be really cool for me to read, and also probably be pretty good for you to reflect and review. Yeah, lovely, Colin. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and mysticism is often a direct experience, right? And it doesn't, someone said to Jung, do you believe in God? He said, believe, I know, like I experience. It's really like, it's a very different thing. Balance is key, yeah. Mysticism is not an excuse to drop boundaries. No, good boundaries are very helpful, yeah? Yeah, so trauma can get in the way of mysticism, and it can also lead towards it. And it can also lead to a bypassed version of it. And it can be helpful in a weird kind of way, in the sort of revelation that there's part of you that can't be broken. There's part of you that's all things, part of you that is love, and love is healing. Yeah. No one quote me on any of this in a public place, by the way. Non-attachment is not the same as detachment. That was good. Who said that? Probably the Buddha. So could you share your morning routine? No way. No way. So what's good for me is not good for you. So if I tell you like everyone should take mushrooms, everyone should do breath work, yeah, then you'll go do what I do, and that won't be good for you. Okay. So here's a good question. What's the safest possible way for your trauma and your life and your health and your functioning and your not being in jail so that you can access this stuff? If you want, it's not for everyone. It's really like only 5-10% of people that should even think about this stuff. Yeah. It's not for everyone. There's a reason the village had one shaman. They didn't have 10. Okay, and then the shaman would like walk around kindergarten, and then he'd go, "Oh, that kid with the cat, he's weird. Do you want to come learn with me, dude?" He wouldn't like take all the kids and teach them, right? This is not an everyone topic. Oh, there's another trap: being special and different. Yeah, being special and different, spiritual trap can lead from trauma. There can be a sense of difference or brokenness or other from the world, and sort of having a kind of spiritual practice can really reinforce that. Like, I have a special name, I have a special voice, I have a special practice. Right, so it's like, yeah, I can. Kashinka's not like that. She's too down to earth. I can see it. Embodied mysticism for me is very down to earth rather than dissociated. In fact, it's so down to earth. It's down in the ground and within you. The deep in, more and more embodied, and then bing, yeah. As opposed to float away. Yeah, I'm not saying that's the only way, but for me, that's a sort of safe grounding way. Yeah, I'm kind of tired of not talking about this stuff in a way. And I feel like I've been quite sort of brave and vulnerable today because I'm like, you know what, people can quote you on this stuff and then you just sound like a lunatic. Yeah. So do look after my public reputation if you are talking about any of this in future around the place. You know, you don't go to my accountant and say, you know, did you know Mark's tripping his balls off in your meetings? A lot of creativity does come out of it, though. So some wonderful tax avoidance schemes have come out of my mysticism. Wonderful. He's very creative. Is it avoidance or the legal one? The legal one. Very creative place, the mystical experience. My accountant's like, how did you think of that? That's brilliant. Do you want a job? I'm like, no way, but I'm glad we've thought about it. Yeah. Okay. Creativity. Wonderful. We can end the session there sort of on the recording, and then we can have some Q&A where we can really get weird. So if you could stop the live stream and the recording, and we'll just do some Q&A for people who have been good enough to get up so early. And could you put where you are in your name? I'd really appreciate that. It really helps.
So would you say for the recording, one word about our Drama with Lan course and how that can help? It can help.
Alan's mystical friendly for sure. She definitely is. So Alan's course is basic trauma healing for those people who kind of want, you know, one method that works. There are many, but Alan's someone I trust, and she's definitely mystical friendly. And then this stuff, you know, the superpowers piece, which is like learning to turn your trauma into something really positive. And then the third one is for facilitators, because trauma expresses in lots of different ways, like mysticism. So you kind of need to have some knowledge of all the ways it expresses as through a facilitator. Because, you know, like my trauma is being too nasty, Erica's is being too nice, right? Like that's the opposite thing. And we both have similar trauma, actually. Make sense? We're from a similar background. We grew up in a similar place, like region of the country. We're a similar age, but totally opposite patterns, literally opposite. So as a facilitator, that sort of third thing where you can learn about the different types is it's really helpful. Okay, good. Let's stop this now. I'm teaching